On this Don't Be a Drag, Just Be a Queen Sunday, I want to talk about actually several queens and several kinds of queens, but we'll start with Queen Esther from the Bible. Now, of course, you know the story, so why am I here taking up your time telling a story? Well, you may not have heard it just this way. It will be authentic, it will be true to the story, it just will not leave out some of the things that may have been left out when you heard it before, especially as a child. So, once upon a time, there was a Persian ruler named Ahasuerus. I dare you to say it. Ahasuerus. In fact, if you were in child Sunday school, you probably learned his name was Xerxes, because that's so much easier to say. But it is, in fact, Ahasuerus. And Ahasuerus had a party. It lasted 6 months. So he wasn't all bad, right? So he had a 6-month party. But on day, 173, he decided, you know what this party needs? It needs for my queen, Vashti, to come and do some entertainment. So he summons Vashti, his queen, his consort, his wife, to come and dance for him and his male friends. And Vashti thinks, that doesn't sound like a good idea to me. Y'all been drinking for 6 months. And now I'm going to come in and do this. And she didn't want to be gawked at by his male companions, and she didn't want to be groped, and God knows what else. So she sends back a message, no thank you. Well, people don't refuse the Persian king. In fact, you can't speak to the Persian king without permission. And the Persian king is so powerful that even the Persian king can't rescind his own edict. So if he says, let it be done, it can't be undone. That's how powerful he is. And Vashti said, no. Well, luckily, as far as we know, Vashti kept her head, but she was punished. And so Ahasuerus said, send word back that she's no longer my queen. She's no longer my consort. It doesn't say they got divorced. I imagine she was just dumped back into the harem. But she is no longer the queen. And so he needs a new queen. And he decides that what he will do to get a new queen is have a contest throughout the empire, a pageant, if you will. And the winner of the pageant will be the new queen. And so people are sent out to gather the most beautiful women in the empire to participate in this pageant. But no, it never says that anyone applied to compete in this pageant. Do you know what I mean? Like no one said, oh, wow, that sounds like a great thing. Where do I sign up? No, if someone said, oh, look, she's beautiful, they just snatched her up and she's in the contest. And we've already learned from Vashti that things like consent and agency and self-determination, not important to the patriarchy. Thank God we're past all that now. So, Esther is one of the beautiful women in the country. And so she is recruited, is put into the pageant truck. She's now a contestant. Now, she is a Jewish orphan who has been raised by her older cousin Mordecai. And now that she's one of the contestants, there might be a little problem because she is Jewish. She's a Jewish girl in this Persian empire. But she's not out about it to the Persians. She is in her closet of Judaism. They don't know her tea. They don't know her true story. They don't know all about who she is. They don't know where she comes from. They don't know what her and her people have been through. They don't know anything about her. Someone looked at her, made a judgment, and now she's supposed to live into what they've decided about her. Thank God we're past all that. Well, so now the story tells us that all the women gathered are all over the empire for this honor of being in this pageant, whether they wanted to be or not, that they are now sort of taken to a harem. And it's sort of really a finishing school. a harem finishing school. And so in the harem, they're going to learn how to be glamorous. They're going to learn how to be beautiful. They're going to learn how to be poised. They're going to learn how to be someone that a king would want for his queen. And so they're learning, they are in queen training camp. And while they're in this beauty, they're going to learn about beauty treatments. They're going to learn about cosmetics. They're going to learn about glamour and fashion. And this is all supervised by, guess who usually supervises harems? A eunuch. Yes, eunuch is in charge of the harem finishing school that Esther has now been enrolled in. And the head eunuch, the eunuch in charge of the harem, his name is Haggai. Hegai. It looks like he gay, but it's Haggai. So Esther becomes good friends with Haggai, who helps her with skincare and makeup. This eunuch, this person assigned male at birth, who is in charge of teaching women how to be more womanly, is actually teaching Esther the art of drag, how to paint, how to beat, how to tease the hair, how to look and perform a certain way. And it's this eunuch, this person assigned male at birth, who is helping her live into her queenliness. He's teaching her how to slay as a queen. Now, when I say he was a eunuch, I want you to know some things about eunuchs. Eunuchs were a sexual and or gender minority in antiquity. Now, you know, when I say eunuch, you've got a picture of what that means. But it's actually a pretty broad category. Jesus said that there were three kinds of eunuchs, and he wasn't making this up. This was just the way it was. This was what was known about eunuchs. Yes, most eunuchs have been surgically altered. But some eunuchs were identified as eunuchs just because they were different. They just looked and behaved differently. They were supposed to be boys, but they acted like girls. They were supposed to be girls, but they acted like boys. They just didn't fit binary norms. And so those people were sometimes called eunuchs. Eunuchs because they didn't fit in. They were something else. They didn't look manly enough or womanly enough, or they didn't act the way they were supposed to act, so they were considered eunuchs. And then celibate people who were celibate because of cultic practices. They wanted to be a priest or a monk, and so they took a vow of celibacy. So if you were on purpose not married or going to have children because of religious reasons, or if you just came here really, really different, or if you'd had this surgical alteration, those are the three ways to be a eunuch. And when the Bible talks about eunuchs, it just says eunuchs. It doesn't distinguish between them. We usually think of the one kind, but it very likely includes all three kinds. And so here is this eunuch, a sexual or gender minority. Eunuchs are sometimes considered in antiquity a third gender, which then upends the binary. And in some cultures, even to this day, eunuchs are expected to dress, sort of cross-dress. Male eunuchs are meant to dress as women. So eunuchs played a social role that did not fit into the binary. Eunuchs, okay, who cares? Who cares? Okay, so eunuchs, they were odd, they were different, and why does that matter? It's because we see eunuchs, a sexual and gender minority. They are affirmed by Jesus in Matthew 19. They are affirmed by the prophet Isaiah. There is a eunuch who rescues the prophet Jeremiah in Jeremiah 38, the hero of the story. And there is a eunuch who is warmly embraced by the deacon Philip in Acts 8. Okay, these are some important eunuchs. These sexual and gender minority folks, these people who don't fit in the binary, these people who are identified and expected to live into certain ways. These people are often the heroes of stories, but wait, there's more. Sexual and gender minorities have always been around in every class, every culture, every age. They've always been around, and they are even present in our sacred stories. All right, but weren't you talking about Esther? Give me a minute, I'm getting there. In the story of Esther, it is a eunuch who teaches Esther how to be more glamorous, how to become a literal queen. It is Queen Haggai who teaches Esther how to become Queen Esther. Now, Esther is a friend of eunuchs. Esther is a eunuch ally. Haggai is not the only eunuch we'll meet in the story of Esther. In each chapter of Esther, every single chapter of Esther, eunuchs are mentioned. In fact, they're named. In fact, we even get their bios. 2 were failed assassins. One's a cosmetologist. One is the keeper of the harem. One is a messenger. Several are security guards. We know there are eunuchs mentioned 12 times, 12 mentioned by name, and what they do in the world. God is not mentioned in the book of Esther, but eunuchs are a dozen times. That's the truth. Mary, the mother of Jesus, is mentioned 19 times in the entire Bible. Eunuchs are mentioned 47 times in the Bible. And 12 of those times are in the story of Esther. And if you are part of the LGBTQ plus community, or if you are an ally, which makes you part of the LGBTQ plus community, that's what the plus is about. If you are a fan of drag artists and what's not to love, or if you are a friend or member of any targeted group, Esther will remind you that you have access to divine power. Someone said you weren't good enough. They didn't know. Someone said you didn't belong. They didn't know. They didn't know that there is one power and one presence in the universe and in our lives, God, the good omnipotent. They didn't know that there's just the one. And so you don't get to be other. You don't get to be marginalized. You don't get to be not good enough, because there's just one. And it can't exclude anyone from itself. We are part and parcel of the one. Well, yeah, you can applaud the one. Yes, for the one. Well, Esther wins the contest. She's queen now. And soon after that, though, a villainous man, isn't there always a villainous man? A villainous man named Haman is appointed the viceroy. And Haman has a law enacted. So see, as the viceroy, he can write the legislation, and then the king can sign it. But once the king signs it, that's the way it has to be until the end of time. And nefarious Haman has written it and gotten the king to sign it without paying much attention to it. And the law is that all the Jews in the empire will be killed. And the first one will be Mordecai, the guy who has raised Esther, because Mordecai didn't give him enough deference one time. He was walking by, he didn't bow because of his own religious principles, but because he felt slighted by Mordecai. Now all the Jews are to be killed, and Mordecai is number one. And so he builds gallows just for Mordecai to set an example. And so Mordecai sends, by way of a eunuch, a message to the queen saying, you are the only one who can help us here. It could be that for such a time as this, you've become queen, because you have the king's ear, and you could make a difference. You know what? I think I'm cheating y'all by not letting you see these eyelashes. I'm going to take these off. So, right? So, maybe you are the one. Now remember, even though she's queen, she has no power, she has no authority. She can't even speak to him without an invitation. But she's closer than anyone else is to him. No other Jewish person has access to the king. Now, she isn't out, though. She can't just walk in and say, hey, we're supposed to be killing all the Jewish people, but that means me. And I sure would love it if that didn't happen. Except that is what she did. Well, first of all, she says that she'll pray about it. She doesn't have any political power, but she does have closer access than most. So she starts a prayer chain. I'm going to do this. Y'all pray for me. That's never a bad first step. And then she says, I'm going to do what I can, because what God does for us, God does through us. So I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to pray about it. And in case my own fears get in the way, I'm going to have some chaplains or practitioners pray with me and for me. And then I'm going to let go and let God. I'm going to release the outcome. I can't promise you anything. What I know is there's one power and one presence. I'm going to turn this over to that power and presence, and I'm going to trust that whatever happens is for the highest and best good. I'm going to let go and let God. Probably not a bad formula for whatever we're facing in life. And so Esther she does this and is granted an audience with the king. Isn't it great when your husband says, yeah, you can come see me? So she goes to see him and says, I would like a banquet. A banquet? The last one lasted 6 months and got Vashti fired. Are you sure you want a banquet? But she says, yeah, I would like a banquet. And now remember, it is a banquet where Vashti got in trouble, but now it's a banquet that is part of the plan to free an entire people, to save an entire people. Banquets are mentioned 44 times in the Old Testament. 20 of those, almost half, are in the book of Esther. Oh, y'all just thought you knew Esther. Y'all just thought you knew Esther, right? So in the book of Esther, there are almost half the banquets in the Old Testament. Good things happen when we get together in joy. Good things happen when we get together for a festival. Good things happen when we get together for a party. Good things happen when we get together for a parade. When we remember to get together and share and celebrate and find joy, miracles can come out of that. People aren't trying to silence the party people because parties aren't powerful. Parties are empowering. They are celebrations of joy, and joy is one of the attributes of the divine. Well, she gets her banquet, and at the banquet, the king's having such a good time. You know how he gets when he's having a good time. He just may have his wife strip. You never know. But he's having such a good time. Instead of saying, hey, why don't you dance for my buds? He says, you know what, Esther, I like you. Ask me for anything, and it's yours. And she says, well, now that you mention it, I might be Jewish, and all the Jewish people in the empire are condemned to death, and that includes me and all my family, and I would really love if that genocide did not take place. She comes out. This is the part of the story where she comes out. She's been in her Judaic closet this whole time, and now she comes out. She risks a lot, but she does it for the good of her people, and so she comes out. And by simply speaking her truth, she changes the fate of her people. Just by saying, I'm here, look at me and know me for who I am, that changes the course of history for her people. And the king asks, kill your people, kill you, kill a big bunch of people in my empire. What? Who did this? Who would dare assault my queen and her people and her family? And Esther points at Haman and says, there's the fiend. Oh, the king is through, because there's no law that he didn't sign. And if he signed this terrible law, that means Haman has tricked him. Oh, he's undone. He storms out. And while he's out, Haman throws himself on Esther for mercy, begging her to somehow spare his life. But when the king comes back in, all he sees is Haman all over the queen. He assumes it's a threat or an attack. Cut to Haman hanging from Mordecai's gallows. Now we, in our modern sensibilities, we don't like that violence. We don't appreciate the violence, but the story does come from a violent time. In fact, it's a story about an empire, and empires are built on violence. But the point for us isn't the tit for tat and isn't the violence. The point for us is that things can change. The point is that Esther came out and spoke up and changed the course of events. Now, I doubt if this story even happened. As great as it is, right? It probably didn't happen. Persian kings married from a very select group of aristocratic families. There was no Persian version of The Bachelor. That just didn't happen, did it? But the point of the story is that even a seemingly predetermined course can be changed, and that's the capital T truth. That we look past appearances to what is true. Yes, in the moment, something terrible is happening, but that's not the end of the story, that's not the point of the story, and that's not our truth. That is a changing, fleeting fact. That is not the truth, which is there's one power and one presence in the universe and in my life, God, the good omnipotent. It is a story that shows that parties and festivals can lead to real change. I think there have been record number of people at Pride celebrations this year because they want to be seen and heard. They want to be seen and heard. They need to be seen and heard because that does make change. It's a story that shows that we are always at choice about how we respond to the conditions in life. Esther was at choice about not coming out, and then she was at choice about when to come out and why and for what purpose. We are always at choice about what to do next. This didn't happen the way I wanted to, but now what? I used to have a mentor that would say, whenever anything would happen, so what, now what? That happened, now what am I going to do? Because that's going to set the wheels in motion for the next thing. It's a story that shows the importance of allies. It is a story that reminds us that when we are ready to come out as whoever we really are, that act of authenticity can bless and even save the lives of others. You being you can help someone else be who they are, and that may change and even save their lives. It's a story of people who have been discounted, and they have learned, though, that they have access to a power, to an omnipotence that no one can take from them. And it is a story where drag queens become queen makers, where women stand up for themselves and for their communities, and where people who were told they weren't good enough discover that in reality, we are all God in drag. And so it is. Bless you.